Well, President Trump is about to take off from India after a packed two-day tour which was overshadowed by the violence in Delhi. In terms of big takeaways, there were frankly none. In the end, only 3 agreements were signed, but again, there was nothing dramatic there. President Trump held his own press conference earlier this evening since questions were not allowed at the joint press statement with the Prime Minister earlier in the day. It was at this press conference in the evening that the US President was asked about the violence in Delhi, the Citizenship Act and Pakistan. On Delhi, he said that he did not raise the issue of violence in Delhi, that it was India's matter, that the Citizenship Act was also India's own matter, but he did say he raised the issue of rising hate crimes against Muslims and Christians, but that he thought the Prime Minister gave a very powerful response to that. When asked about Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, the President talked about mediating on Kashmir again, said Kashmir was a thorn in both sides and that there are 2 sides to every story. He also described Kashmir as a big problem between India and Pakistan, but backpedaled just a bit later, saying that Kashmir would be sorted out between the 2 countries. Here are some highlights of what he said.
What is your position at the moment on India's Citizen Amendment Act at the moment?
I don't want to discuss that. I want to leave that to India, and hopefully they're going to make the right decision for the people. That's really up to India.
While you've been here in the country, in the capital, northeast part of Delhi, there have been violent clashes. Police have been killed, some demonstrators, 9 deaths so far, we hear, and about 100 plus injured. What did Prime Minister Modi say to you about this amended citizenship law?
So we did talk about religious freedom, and I will say that the Prime Minister was incredible what he told me. He wants people to have religious freedom, and very strongly, and he said that in India they have worked very hard to have great and open religious freedom. And if you look back and look at what's going on relative to other places especially, but they have really worked hard on religious freedom. I asked that question in front of a very large group of people today, and he talked about it. We talked about it for a long time, and I really believe that's what he wants. As far as the individual attack, I heard about it, but I didn't discuss that with him. That's up to India. Kashmir has been a thorn in a lot of people's sides for a long time, and there are 2 sides to every story, but they've been working on that very hard. We discussed it at great length, terrorism, and I think we have some very good ideas. He's very, very strongly against terrorism. I'll tell you, Prime Minister Modi is a very religious man, as you know. He's a very calm man, but he's actually a very, very strong person, very tough, actually. When I've seen him in action, and he's got that foremost in his mind, terrorism. He'll take care of it.
Yeah. President, my question is that you said at the time of the Article 370 abrogation that you would like to mediate in Kashmir, but India rejected it.
No, I'd like to be able to. No, excuse me.
My question.
Wait. I didn't say that. I didn't say anything about that. I just said Kashmir, obviously, there's a big problem between Pakistan and India, and I think they're going to work out their problem, but I will say they've been doing it for a long time.
Well, joining us here in the studio, Navteej Sarna, India's former ambassador to the United States. Maya Meechandani is back with us, senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and assistant professor at Ashoka University. Raymond Vickery also back with us tonight, who is a senior advisor with the Albright Stonebridge Group and has worked with the Clinton administration on trade issues. Mr. Sarna, to you first. Let's talk about the fact that this would have actually been our top story under normal circumstances, but it's not normal. And you have these images juxtaposed of the violence in Delhi on one hand and the Trump visit on the other. How do you think this would have played out for the government, the fact that you had the US president here and all these things happening in Delhi?
But that's unfortunate, and clearly some of the news images that would have gone out would be replaced by these images. So I think we'd have to see the visit for what it was, and not for the fact that the images have become contradictory. So
what did you think of his statements on when he was asked about the CAA on Delhi violence? He was being very careful not to get into it.
I think he was extremely careful. If you see his press conference, right at the top of the press conference, he started off by saying that I'm not going to get into a controversy. I don't want to ruin 2 days of travel and 2 days of the visit. You see, we have to see that for him the visit has gone exceptionally well. So he came all the way to India, he came for the large crowds, he came to talked to the Prime Minister. He came to push certain things, and he brought his entire family. So clearly he doesn't want to say something which obliterates all that in public perception.
Before I come to the other sort of aspects of this visit, Raymond Vickery, what do you think of how the president handled these questions on religious freedom, the way these images played out in Delhi today while he was visiting? Do you think he should have said something more, given that it was happening literally a few miles away from where he was staying and where that press conference was being held?
Well, first of all, our hearts and prayers go out to the people of Delhi and India and for the loss of life. Violence is never the answer. Gandhi has taught us that. Martin Luther King has taught us that. I do think that this shows the limits of great man diplomacy, that all you need to do is get the two great men together, and that's all that's really needed. In fact, it goes much deeper than that, and you have to have the institutional national interest at heart, whether it be in security, whether it be in trade, or whether it be in values. It seems to me the president was wise in being careful, but I do wish that something could have been said in regard to nonviolence, in regard to equality before the law, in regard to those kinds of values which have bound the United States and India together beyond the questions of security and trade. So I think that it could have been done better. I really regret that there was only a one-person press conference. It seems to me that the message ought to be that the U.S. and India, President Trump, Prime Minister Modi are standing together to address these issues.
Well, it's interesting you say that we also wish it was not a one-man press conference, but, you know, if wishes were horses. But Alyssa Iris, for the Council for Foreign Relations, is also joining us from Washington, D.C. Alyssa, your thoughts on that? And it was interesting that there was a journalist at the press conference who stood up and, you know, asked the president, your own record on how you treat Muslims ain't so good. So, you know, in a way saying that who is he to lecture India on protecting minorities? And, you know, he didn't ultimately.
Right. Well, President Trump has actually a famously combative relationship with the U.S. press. He routinely throws members of the U.S. press out of his events if he decides he doesn't want them there. He calls mainstream media fake news. He gets into fights with individual journalists. So this was just one more chapter in what we're used to seeing here at home.
Yep, we saw that on display today. Maya, just on this issue of religious freedom, Maya was there with me at the press conference, evading, you know, any sort of controversy, as I think Navtesh Sarna rightly said. He was trying to just avoid any controversy at all.
Yeah, and I think that would be seen by many on the Indian side as a sort of you know, small victory on this trip, considering especially 2 days before he had come to India, there were statements from senior US government officials suggesting that he would take up issues of the detentions in Kashmir and the concerns over religious freedom, especially in the wake of the Citizenship Amendment Act, quite strongly with the Indian Prime Minister. So there was obviously a lot of attention to the fact that he might raise these issues, but maybe he just got really taken in by the 1,25,000 people who came to Ahmedabad. He, you know, loved the spectacle, the reception, like the crowds to receive him. You're right. Maybe he did say that privately, and we'll never know, I suppose, because if he's chosen to say this in public, it's going to take some deep digging to find out exactly what he said in private. I think from that, the real takeaway was just that he had raised not the CAA, but religious freedom with the Prime Minister, and not just about Muslims, but also about Christians, which is his constituency back in the United States. And a lot of statements from the US Commission for Religious Freedoms also talks about what's happening with all minorities, religious minorities in India, not just Muslim minorities. So it was raised, whether it was dramatically raised, but he says he was pleased by Prime Minister Modi's powerful answer that Prime Minister Modi wants religious freedom for everybody in India. He said that at one point as well in his press conference. But wanting something in a hypothetical sense and actively promoting policies that ensure and encourage those freedoms in a plural democracy that India is, I think, is a whole different story.
Well, coming back to the rest of the visit though, Mr. Sarna, just, if you look at what was signed today and what have we really taken away from this visit? Frankly, we expected some other agreements on the table today. It came down to just 3 agreements, nothing big bang in that, some intent on defense announced. It seemed to be a bit of a whimper.
Well, I think I differ with you on that, Nidhi, because I think we have got too much into the habit of looking at every visit for a big deliverable. And, it doesn't happen. Once relationships mature beyond a point, then it's just a lot of it is just keeping it ticking and pushing. And the fact that you get a president of the United States to India maybe once in a term, sometimes usually once in 2 terms, I think that itself is a big thing. And I don't think we really expected too many agreements. Frankly, the one that was really expected was already dampened down a few days ago about the trade. Because when it was not happening, I think both sides put it out that, look, this is not happening, we are not ready at the moment.
We were expecting that maybe on the nuclear deal, finally, that the deal with the Westinghouse for the 6 nuclear reactors may happen, a counter-terrorism center would be established in Homeland Security.
Well,
none of that happened today.
That is true. I mean, I'm not sure about the nuclear deal. I don't think that was ready, but the counter-terrorism center was talked about. So I would not look at really the 3 minor agreements that have been signed as the major achievements. I think what the major achievements of this visit is the fact that he has given very strong messages about the future of the relationship. I mean, he's been absolutely superlative about the relationship, not just about his personal relationship. Secondly, there are some areas which have got a push. One is the Indo-Pacific, in which he's talked of the Blue Dot project, which we have to look at. He's talked of new things in counterterrorism, like the working group on narcotics, and all that has been set up. And I think particularly the defense partnership. Of course, the way it's been put out is that there is this $3 billion deal.
But it's more than that. And I think that's something the Prime Minister spoke about as well. He said it's about defense and security, and that's what we need to look out for.
So those are the things which in long-term strategic interest, I think, which when you have the 2 leaders and a successful overall visit, all that gets in impetus, which then keeps flowing out for months and months.
Maya. So I think I just want to add to what Navtej is saying, which is that, the India-US relationship has had moments that have been larger than other moments in the relationship. So when Clinton came in 2000, it was after 20 years that an American president had come to India, and much was made of it. The 2005 nuclear deal was another such moment in the India-US relationship. But the idea that the deliverable today is simply that the relationship is stable and a president can come and, there doesn't need to be some major deal that's signed.
Is in itself,
because it is in itself like a deliverable. I mean, if you see what happens when he travels to other US partners in Europe, whether it's France or Germany or England, there isn't some great announcement of a security initiative or a partnership or an economic initiative every time. It's just, routine meetings. I mean, so maybe that, I'm not saying that's
Mr. Sarna,
that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah,
possibly.
just to add to that, Maya, I think one of the issue of trade, for instance, which is known to be a divisive issue. I think although we didn't sign anything, it's clearly been put out that now the limited deal that is almost ready will be given a legal framework. And now both the leaders have said that we are looking at a big deal by the end of the year. Trump has said it in his second press conference that it should happen by the end of the year. That means you've actually taken the wind out of the whole trade balloon, because now we have something to work on and we have a target to work on.
In fact, I wanted to ask Alyssa about that, because she's done extensive research on that. How did you see the messaging on trade today, Alyssa?
Well, wasn't that much for them to offer, sort of talking about looking ahead to a comprehensive agreement down the line. I don't really know what that means. And for those of us who follow these things closely, it seems that it's not a great signal to have missed this window, to have missed this moment, to be able to say, yeah, we finally reached agreement on some of the 5 or 6 thorny issues that have been troubling us for the last 10 years, in some cases the last 2 years, but at least be able to clear some of these problems off the plate so we can expand and look ahead to other issues. So I think the fact of no agreement, nothing to offer right now, no matter how small, sends a not great signal at our ability to do something even larger down the line. That's what I think a lot of us are worried about.
So last word to you, Raymond Vickery. Would you say that whoever becomes the US president, whether it is maybe Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump later this year, that the India-US relationship has acquired a momentum of its own and it will continue to be the way that it is?
There's no question that there is very strong support in the United States and in India for the strongest possible relationship between these two greatest democracies on earth. However, having said that, it is clear that this visit was a wasted opportunity, in part because it really didn't go much beyond the question of mass entertainment, if you will, in terms of a rally. I think it's great for a president to go and to cement personal relations, but you need to make progress on trade, as Alyssa has said. You need to make progress on security agreements. You need to make progress on values and the joint action to be able to further democratic values across our two great nations. And for that, it's just too bad. I think we should be grateful for what we got, but we ought to look forward to being able to get more substance in the future.
All right. Well, thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight for some perspective on that whirlwind 2-day visit. And we're going to leave you now with these pictures and statements from the First Lady, Melania Trump, who was, interestingly, while all of this was happening in Delhi today, attending a happiness class in a Delhi school. Go figure.
It is very inspiring to me that the students here begin each day by participating mindfulness. From mindful breathing, telling a story to a friend, listening to another classmate, or simply connecting with nature, I cannot think of a better way for all of us to start our day. I also visited one of your primary school reading classrooms and learned about the reading program. Encouraging students to explore books of their own interest is very effective and increases reading habits and life skills. In the United States, I work with children like you to promote similar ideas of well-being through my Be Best initiative.